Check 1 2 3 4 5. Check 1 2 3 4 5. Check 1 2 3 4 5. Check 1 2 3.
More fun to see you. You rolling? From where you have been and where you are now, what do you see as Hugh Carey's contribution over his 2 terms, his 8 years as governor?
Well, I think there has been many contributions, but the one that stood out in my mind the most was the one centered around the fiscal crisis, where the city of New York was in turmoil. A lot of poor people, jobs were threatened. And I think his leadership at that time and his ability to bring together the labor leaders, business community, the banking community, and government, and try to resolve that crisis, which he was successful in doing, really showed great leadership and great heart, because even if one person was laid off, it was painful, but he was cognizant of the fact that his role and everybody's role then meant so much to so many. And I was very impressed with that.
At that time, you were, what we say, in the private sector. You were working with the labor movement.
Yes.
How would you characterize? What would you say about Hugh Carey's? Well, let me rephrase that. The folks who are in the labor movement have had a friend in Hugh Carey. How do you think that the labor movement as a whole feels about this man now as he leaves office?
I think they feel warmly about him. Labor would never really admit, you know, when they were perhaps angry with him, because it's their role to get as much as they can for the people they represent. But when all is said and done, he has been an excellent leader for the state of New York, and has worked fairly, I think, with labor, giving them as much as he could, and yet being very responsible to the people, all of the people within the state.
Mm-hmm. How about your favorite Hugh Carey story or vignette? What, you know, a couple of years from now, you are doing something other than what you're doing now, and you're going to look back to your service with Hugh Carey and your acquaintance with him before that. What's going to come back to you as your best and favorite memory?
Well, I can remember having direct contact with him at the time when we were jointly announcing the Job Crusade for the state of New York, which was designed to announce our computerized mechanism and job matching. And when the reporters asked him about it, it was shortly after he had announced he was not going to run. And he sort of laughed and said that he was going to place his resume in the computerized bank. And we thought that was very funny because...
Did you get any offers?
No, we didn't.
Maybe more generally, I remember I was with him and you shortly before your nomination, and there was a get-together down on the sort of the edge of the Catskills when your union and a bunch of other folks were there. I think McGowan and some of the other people were there. But there was great enthusiasm and sort of an upward thrust to that day, and he was very enthusiastic about you.
Oh, yes.
Hugh Carey had a knack, don't you think, of sort of seeking out people, and yourself, you know, you would have to be included in this, but it is seeking out people who could lead and be inspired. What did you get from him as sort of your leader? And you were on the team now. What sort of feeling came up to move you along in your new responsibility?
I think he's always been supportive, very supportive, and always reached out to be warm, because it was foreign for me to change over. But he made me very comfortable, and I think the whole thing is permitting you to be innovative and do the kinds of things that I'm sure he wanted, and that was to serve the people within the state. And that's what I remember about him. I respect him for it. I was very saddened when he chose not to run because I was really enjoying the team.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. I think we got some nice little tips there. Paul will laugh like hell and not look like a chairman at all.
And then I'll just reframe like I did on Robinson before the
That's fine,
questions,
yeah.
so you can break it up.
Okay. The initial question that I've asked everybody, and the responses have been, you know, the full spectrum. From where you have been in the Carey administration and where you are now, in other words, the breadth of your experience in the Carey administration, what do you think was the governor's contribution to the state and its people?
Well, because I've been working for the governor since January 1 of '75, and it's 8 years of experiences. The thing that first comes to mind, of course, is the fiscal crisis, both the city and the state. And the governor's primary role of leadership, because from my point of view, the single most important factor in that whole series of events that led to the re-emergence of the city and the state was Governor Carey's, the force of his personality and his personal leadership. Because we not only survived that crisis, but we survived it in a way that restored the confidence of the people of the state in themselves and in the state. Because I think it's fair to say that we did save ourselves as a result primarily of his leadership. But as I say, I've experienced a whole series of events in working for the governor beyond the fiscal crisis. Nursing home.
Let me turn that around for a minute. If Hugh Carey had not been in office in 1975, and the force of that personality had not been there, can we speculate on what might have happened?
I think that the city and state would have survived, but I don't think that they would have survived in the same way. We didn't come out of that crisis as a basket case. As a matter of fact, I think it's just the opposite. Our point of view primarily is that we face problems that the nation is now facing and resolve them. For example, the things that are happening on the national scene now, the great controversy as to how you make government responsible and still responsive to basic social human needs. We didn't have in this state. And I think that's primarily because of the governor's inherent sound judgment and balance in knowing how to reduce state spending or to contain it, and how to cut taxes, and how to protect those human services that were worthy of protection. I think with very little fanfare, he was able to accomplish a tremendously difficult task, which has put this state on a sound footing to face the future. And I do think that the state is a very different place now from what it was in 1974 and 1975. And again, part of that is an extension of Governor Carey's love for New York, which he has expressed in many ways. The I Love New York campaign, the Harvest of Music, his statements throughout his tenure that New York is a special place. And I think those of us who live here and pay attention understand it's a special place. New York City, for example, is a place of tremendous freedom. It tolerates differences and tolerates different kinds of people. Most of us whose families have come from different parts of the world have been at least allowed to to work here and to ultimately survive and prosper. The arts, fashion, commerce flourish in this very unique environment. And the state is, in truth, the Empire State, tremendous diversity and tremendous resources, which I think people had lost sight of as a result of changing economic circumstances. And the governor focused on that. And I think that New York now feels, as a state, I believe that we can face the future with confidence and prosper as we did in the past.
I interrupted you, and you were about to go on to the nursing home contribution.
Well, I just say that the public tends to focus on one or two major events, but I mean, just off the top of my head, I know that in 1975 the governor was not only facing a fiscal crisis in New York City and New York State, he was facing a medical malpractice insurance crisis. There was a real threat that essential health services would not be provided to the people in the state. That became a problem in December of 1974, and he had to deal with it. There was a crisis with respect to the attic investigation. Again, just before he took office, the counsel's office received a confidential report by a man who was claiming that there was corruption in the criminal justice system in this state. And that was a crisis that he dealt with in a very innovative and intelligent manner. There was a crisis in the latter part of '75 when a special prosecutor in New York City was running out of control, with unfortunately the support of the media. And people don't talk about that now, but it took tremendous courage to stand up to that situation at great political risk, and he overcame it. I think there was a situation that was a real threat to the safety, public safety of the people of the state, which he dealt with. There was a crisis with respect to Willowbrook and the care of retarded people in this state, which he handled. Criminal justice, for example, I know that on many occasions he took political risks in vetoing popular criminal justice bills that were poorly drafted and would have been ineffective. On the other hand, he was responsible for forging some very tough but rational criminal justice laws, which in a real sense revolutionized the criminal justice laws in this state with respect to the treatment of career criminals and juvenile offenders who commit very, very serious crimes. He made tremendous gains in the areas of court reform. I don't know how much of this is the public is aware of, but there's a whole slew of issues that this governor has faced with courage and has resolved.
How about your favorite Carey story? 2 years from now, whatever you may be doing, you're going to be looking back, let's say, in a retrospective moment and come up with your favorite remembrance of Hugh Carey, the man. I have a remembrance of Hugh Carey, the man. It's not a story. I think it's a composite. Having served on his staff for a long time and seeing him on a frequent basis dealing with a whole range of problems, he's a man of brilliance, and I don't use that word lightly. I came to realize in working with him that I had a different kind of intelligence that I would tend to build step by step. And in bringing a problem and a proposed solution to the governor, he would very often come up with solutions that at first seemed unusual, but ultimately in examining his response, you came to realize that it was an intelligent and I would say very often you could fail to say a brilliant response. He was a man of great courage, and the thing that was always tremendous satisfaction to me was being able to go in to the governor with a very difficult problem, with potential political consequences, and while he certainly would consider those,
ultimately would make a decision which was in the best interest of the public. And when the political scene is filled with people who I tend to refer to as political parasites, by that I mean people who tend to gain a political benefit from a problem, whether it's toxic waste dumping or utility rates. And here's a man who saw it as his role to solve difficult problems and to make difficult choices. As far as I'm concerned, that's the reason for being in public service, which I consider a tremendous privilege. And the governor consistently took the political risks to do the right thing. That's my basic image of him, which I will carry into the future.
What else is there to say? That's very nice, thank you.
I don't know. You know, it bothers me because I really like to say to say a lot.
Other things.
No, I'd like to, but I'd like to say it right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just don't know. You know,
No, there's some
if I
nice
had more.
Okay. My name's Dan Carpenter, third mate on the tanker here at Cove Explorer. We're here in the port of Albany loading grain for Alexandria, Egypt. Carry about 20,000 tons, and we'll be heading off probably sometime Saturday morning.
How long is the voyage to Alexandria?
15 days over there, maybe a week or two in Alexandria, then pick up a load and come back here.
You've been there before, Dan?
No.
First time.
First time. All my experiences in South America.
Where have you been there?
Every country down there except Bolivia.
Is this your first time to Port of Albany?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. First time on the East Coast.
Did you get to spend any time in Albany?
Oh yeah. Beautiful city, lots of old buildings.
Thank you. I don't know if you'll ever see it on TV.
No.
How far is it from